welcome back to Intentional Money Moves Live. Excuse me. I am so glad that you are here. If you're joining for the first time, welcome. I'm Leah Hadley. I am a financial planner. I'm the founder of Intentional Wealth Partners and Intentional Divorce Solutions. And this is a space where we talk about money in a way that feels like a real conversation. So if you are watching, please say hello. Let me know where you're tuning in from. I always like to see who's in the room. And if you're watching the replay, comment #replay and let me know that as well. So it's May. And if you know anything about the wellness space, you know that May is Mental Health Awareness Month. And I want to be honest with you, when I first thought about doing a show on the topic, I kind of was thinking to keep it pretty surface level. I was thinking about talking about stress, financial stress, about budgeting, self-care, just kind of keeping it light. But there's this topic that keeps coming up in conversations that I'm having with people. So keeping it just a very surface level didn't quite set well with me. And instead, I want to talk about what I'm really seeing with women, what I see in my practice, what I see in our community inside the Empowered Sisterhood, what I've experienced myself at certain times in my life. And it's something that is much deeper than stress. It's avoidance. Like not opening the statement. I know it's there, but I can't make myself look at it, kind of avoidance. And I think that deserves a real conversation. So that's what we're talking about today. But before I get into it, let me know how you're doing. Like, I want to know, actually, how are you? I always ask it, but I really mean it. May has been a very full month for me, and I've been doing a lot of reflecting this time of year. It tends to do that for me, with the renewal of spring and with Mother's Day. And I've been thinking a lot about what does it mean to be intentional, not just with your money, but what does it mean to be intentional with your emotional energy, with what you allow yourself to avoid and what you decide that you're going to face. Okay. And so if you're here today and something maybe is feeling a little bit heavy in your life, I want you to know this is a safe space, okay? What we talk about today, this is for you, okay? So let's talk. Hey, Jen, thanks for being here. Let's talk a little bit about financial avoidance. And I want to start with a question. And I want you to answer it honestly, but just in your own head, not in the comments. This is just for you. Is there a financial task that you have been putting off? And that could be anything. It could be a statement that you haven't opened. It might be an account that you haven't logged into. It could be a conversation that maybe you have been avoiding, or a number that you just don't want to look at. Think about something that maybe you've been avoiding, because almost every person that I talk to has at least one of these things. And I know I even do for myself. So let's just bring it to the surface, right? Financial avoidance is that pattern of steering away from money-related tasks or decisions, or even just information. Because for some people, looking at these things, it can produce anxiety, it can produce overwhelm, it can produce shame. And that's so common. And it's honestly not talked about enough in financial planning spaces. I think that as an industry, we just treat money problems as math problems. If you have the right spreadsheet or the right app, the right strategy, if you just knew what to do, right? But I want to be very clear on what we're talking about today, because avoidance is not about not knowing, okay? Most of you know, if there's a statement that you should open, you should open it, right? You know that you need to check that balance, or you need to have that conversation you have been avoiding, and you just don't do it, right? That gap, the gap between knowing and doing, right? That's not an information problem, all right? That gap between knowing and doing is not an information problem, right? That's really where we're looking at the emotional aspects here, okay? And so today we're going to talk about, where does that come from? What is it actually costing you? Because it's actually very expensive, money avoidance, and what to do about it. And I want to be clear, this episode is not about shame. That is an absolute promise to you, okay? This is about having a conversation. This is about real talk. And this conversation, if you want more of this kind of a conversation, you want to be in dialogue around these topics, honestly, the membership program that we have, the Empowered Sisterhood, every week we talk about these things in our Coffee and Clarity chats. And it's the most supportive community. And I am so honored and humbled by the women who are in there and the way they share so vulnerably and support one another. It's really, really beautiful. So if you want more of this, I will be sure to include in the show notes a link to the Empowered Sisterhood so you can find out more about that community. But I want to start really with, where does financial avoidance come from? Okay, so before we talk about what does avoidance cost, I want to just talk a little bit about why it happens to begin with. And I want to be very clear, shame is not a useful tool here, okay? So my goal here is absolutely not to make you feel bad about any kind of a pattern that you might be experiencing, but to really understand that patterns have roots, right? And for a lot of people, financial avoidance, it's a coping mechanism, okay? And so you may have developed it at some point. Maybe engaging with money was painful. Maybe it was humiliating. Maybe it was even dangerous, and your nervous system learned, this isn't safe for me. Don't do this, right? I want to give you some of the common origins that I see. You may identify with one of these things. You can kind of think about it in your own head. You don't need to let us know. But one is that you grew up in a home where money equaled conflict. And that is actually fairly common. If you heard your parents fighting about money, if money was the thing that really made the temperature in your house rise, right? If you learned early that looking at the finances led to stress, it led to arguments, it led to fear, then honestly, your brain is making a very logical connection. Okay. Money isn't safe, right? Avoidance feels like safety. That wiring is not going to automatically disappear when you become an adult and you have your own account. So when we kind of bring that awareness to the surface, we can kind of start to look at these things, right? Second one that I see is that you've been through a financial crisis, whether that was, loss of somebody who was close to you. Maybe it was a job loss, a divorce, a period when you genuinely did not have enough to make ends meet. When we have been through real financial hardship, that account balance, it stops being just a number. It becomes very loaded, and it can be a reminder of a season that you might be trying to put behind you, right? And not everyone is ready to look at it without really having the armor on, if you will, okay? Number 3, you were never taught how any of this works. And again, very common. Very few of us learned much about money in school at all. Very few families had conversations about money, as you were growing up. Honestly, just not knowing, this one is really underrated. If no one ever sat down with you and really showed you how to read a statement, right? How a 401k actually functions, what an investment account is and what it isn't, you may be avoiding not because of fear of the number, but fear of not understanding it or feeling stupid or getting it wrong, right? And in all honesty, as an industry, financial services hasn't been historically very welcoming to women, right? The industry has spent decades making this feel more complicated than it needs to be. And that is not your fault, right? It's not your fault, but we can acknowledge if that's where you're at and we can start to make some adjustments, right? And the last one that I want to share that I see very commonly is that your financial identity was tied to somebody else, okay? And it's something that I see a lot in the divorce financial planning work that I do. Women who had handed the finances over to their spouse, either completely or mostly, and then found themselves alone in a landscape that they just didn't recognize. The avoidance in those cases is often tied in with grief as much as anything else. And it's important to address that with compassion, okay? Not with a lecture, with compassion. So I want you to just sit with those 4 and kind of think, did one of those resonate with you more than another? And again, you don't have to share. just want you to kind of sit with if there's one that feels like it's coming up for you. Because again, understanding where this avoidance comes from is really the beginning of making real change, right? All right. So I said that this would be a real conversation, and I meant it. So let's talk about what financial avoidance is actually costing. And I'm going to be direct with you here. And again, this is not about creating shame, but I do think it's important for you to hear the truth. You deserve the truth, right? Avoidance is not neutral. Every time we don't look, something happens, right? The quiet cost might be late fees, overdraft fees, interest charges that compound while you're not watching. And none of these are catastrophic on their own, but over months and years, it adds up to real money that was yours, that was quietly leaving because you just weren't in the room, right? Let's talk about one of the ones that I don't think gets talked about enough, and that is opportunity costs. There is a window to contribute to your 401k, a window to refinance a mortgage when rates drop, right? A window to add to your health savings account. There are very specific timeframes that we look at when we're making decisions around things like a Roth conversion, right? Financial planning in general, it's full of windows. And when we are in avoidance, we're in a place where those windows are going to open and they're going to close without you, right? The woman who starts investing at 35 versus 45 doesn't just get 10 more years. She's potentially getting 2 to 3 times the outcome because of compound growth. So we can't go back and reclaim that time. And I think that's really important to be aware of. Let's talk about the mental health cost, okay? Because the story gets louder here. Something I find really important. Avoidance does not quiet financial anxiety. It doesn't. Avoidance does not quiet financial anxiety. It actually feeds it. It actually feeds it. The longer you don't do the thing, open the statement or look at the balance, the scarier the story your brain starts to tell you about what is on the other side of what you're avoiding, right? That number in your imagination is almost always worse than the actual number, but you're not going to know that until you look at it, right? And this is where money and mental health are just so deeply connected, because financial avoidance, it keeps that anxiety loop running, right? The anxiety makes the avoidance feel necessary around and around until something or someone forces a stop. And I want you to be the one who decides when the stop happens, right? Not the collections call, not a late notice, you, right? And then last, but certainly not least, let's talk about the relationship cost. Money avoidance, it affects the people around us too. When we're working with a married couple where one partner is in avoidance and the other isn't, that impacts the relationship, right? Business owners who can't look at cash flow, that impacts the whole team, right? Women who can't talk to their kids about money because they don't feel confident on their own, that's going to impact their kids and their kids' ability to manage money well for themselves, right? And sometimes if we're honest, that avoidance, it kind of like becomes its own kind of secret, if you will. And secrets have weight. I do want to reiterate that, I am a huge believer in the power of having these conversations and bringing them to the light, right? And these are the kinds of things that we do talk about inside the Empowered Sisterhood, because honestly, when you're working through some of this stuff, community matters so much. And to be in a room with women who are doing the work, who are saying me too and mean it, right? If that's something that you're ready for, I'm going to make sure that we include the link in the show notes. But let's get into really what can help. And I want to be upfront. I'm not going to give you a 10-step plan here. No, okay? Because I know that is not what moves the needle for most people. What moves the needle for most people is starting smaller. we're going to start as small as we can, and we're going to be as honest as we can, right? And we want to acknowledge we're starting small and being honest with ourselves and celebrating the heck out of every time we put one foot in front of the other. So start with one thing, okay? We're not talking about a whole financial overhaul here. Not even talking about a new system. One thing. You have been avoiding looking at a statement, open the statement. If you've been avoiding logging into an account, log into the account. Look at one number. And here's what I want you to get from that number that you're looking at. Allow it to be a fact. It's just information. It's not a verdict. There's no opinion associated with it. It's not judgment, right? It's just information. And allow it to just be information. Allow it to just be that beginning, right? Number 2 is reduce the activation energy. Now, one of the reasons that avoidance persists is that we make the task too big in our minds, okay? So we think something along the lines of, I need to get my finances in order. And our nervous system hears, this is going to take hours and this is going to be so painful and I don't even know what I'm doing. Well, let's face it, that's overwhelming, right? So instead, I just want you to shrink it down as little as possible, right? What is the smallest version of this task? Open the app, download the app, right? Open the app. Just look at the balance. Don't do anything else. Just look. And we can always build from there, but we want to start as small as we possibly can so that we're not feeling overwhelmed, right? Find a witness. Accountability is so powerful, especially when it comes to money, because so much of the shame lives in the secrecy, right? So when you're doing it alongside somebody, when you're doing it in collaboration with your financial planner or a financial coach or a community of women who are doing the exact same thing, it changes that felt sense, right? You are not alone in the room with your fear anymore, right? And honestly, it is one of the most powerful things about doing this work in a community like the Empowered Sisterhood. Women show up and they say things like, I finally opened my credit card statement for the first time in 4 months. And we celebrate. And that celebration feels so good for everybody, not just the person who accomplished the thing that they had been avoiding, right? But we all feel good because we're celebrating together, and not because it was a perfect moment, but because it was a real one. And we are acknowledging where we are at, right? I lost my spot in my in my outline here. All right. Know when to get deeper support. If your financial avoidance is significantly affecting your daily life, if it's affecting your sleep or your relationships, your ability to hold a job, please consider speaking with a financial therapist. There are therapists who specialize in financial trauma and in money psychology. It's a very real field, and there are wonderful practitioners out there. And there just doesn't have to be any shame in needing this kind of support. We acknowledge where we're at, right? And ideally, if you are working with a financial therapist, your financial planner, and them are on the same page, kind of working in the same direction, right? But it's a conversation that you can have with each of them. And last, I want to share to connect the practical to the emotional, okay? When I work with clients, we're not just looking at numbers. We're talking about what the numbers actually mean to them. What's underneath that avoidance? What is the story that they've been telling themselves? And then we can really build a strategy that accounts for all of it. That accounts for all of it, not just for the math, right? And that is really what intentional money actually means to me, right? It's not just the right investments. It's not the right budget. It's looking at the whole picture, okay? Now let's break it down into 3 very, very simple things that you can do this week. You can write them down if you want. You can rewatch this, but they're very simple, and I wanted to keep them super, super easy for you. First and foremost, do a 5-minute money date with yourself. 5 minutes. I know one of our sisterhood members has been working on this, and she often goes longer, and we're trying to get her to focus down on just that 5 minutes and celebrate it, right? Now, in that 5-minute money date, it's going to depend on what you need right now, right? Do you need to open an account? Do you need to look at a statement? Do you need to identify an app to help you with your cash flow management, right? Now, this 5 minutes, all we're doing is identifying something, right? A next step. This isn't about fixing anything. It's not about allowing yourself to spiral, right? Just look, right? When the 5 minutes goes off, when the timer goes off, you're done. That's it. And if that felt hard, let's acknowledge it. Let's celebrate it, right? Second thing I want you to do this week is name the avoidance. And I want you to get really specific. What exactly are you avoiding? Not my finances, because that's too big, okay? Are you avoiding that credit card statement from April? Or maybe the 401k you haven't looked at since you changed jobs 2 years ago, right? That conversation that you have to have with your ex about the joint account that's still open. Name the specific thing, write it down. Remember that named things actually have less power in your mind than unnamed things, okay? So we started with number 1, 5-minute money date. Number 2, name the avoidance. And the last thing is tell somebody. Just tell one person. You don't have to fix it. Just say it out loud to someone safe. I've been avoiding looking at my retirement account, and I'm going to change that, right? Saying it makes it real, and real things can be addressed. At the end of our weekly sisterhood coffee chats, we always give our members an opportunity to share a goal or an intention for the coming week. And I have even found it for myself. This was several weeks ago. I had shared that I had a goal of going to a spinning class that night. And that particular day, I didn't really feel like I was going to go. Like, I didn't really feel like it that much. But because I named it to our sisterhood members and I said this was something that I was going to do, I went ahead and I did it, right? So, when we're witnessed in acknowledging what matters to us, the goals we're setting for ourselves, it just becomes so much more meaningful, right? So those are small steps intentionally, because this is not about going from avoidance to mastery overnight, right? That's not realistic. Okay, that's not realistic. Oh, I forgot to silence my phone. This is really about focusing on one degree of movement, right? One small movement. That's how we start to put one foot in front of the other. That's honestly how women change their financial lives. It's not this big dramatic moment. It's all the little tiny ones along the way. So I want to close with this. Mental Health Awareness Month exists because we need reminders to talk about the things that we usually just push past, right? And money is one of the things that we push past the most. We perform confidence. We don't always feel, right? We nod along in conversations. We might say things like, I'm working on it, which really actually means something more like, I'm terrified and I don't know where to start, right? Now, if that's where you are, first of all, I see you. And I want you to know that starting is absolutely possible. It may not feel easy. I'll be honest, right? If this is something you've been avoiding for a long time, it's not going to feel easy, but it is possible. The women that I have watched do this work, and I've watched a lot of them over the years, they didn't start from a place of confidence. They started from a place of decision. They made a decision. The decision that staying stuck was costing them more than moving forward. And you have the opportunity to make that decision as well, right? You can actually make that decision right now. And I just want to reiterate, if you are ready to stop doing this alone, the Empowered Sisterhood really is where you belong. It's a community of women who are building wealth. They are facing the hard conversations. They're showing up for themselves and they're showing up for each other with intention. We have masterclasses. We have our weekly community coffee. We do financial coaching. We do a lot of real conversation. And honestly, it's one of the things that I am most proud of. So again, I will include the link in the show notes if that is something that is of interest to you. If you want to go any deeper on this particular topic, it's certainly something that we can absolutely explore together. I want to thank you so much for being here with me today. Seriously, showing up for conversations like this, it takes something, and I don't take it lightly. So I just want to thank you for showing up for yourself, for being here with me. And I will swing back through. If you have questions, you have comments, I will make sure to respond to those. And I'll be back here next Tuesday at noon, same place. So until then, take good care.